So let me turn to the international field, in particular some of the economies there and how they perform differently than we do and what effects I think that's likely to have here on the U.S. First of all, there are a lot of, so here's the good news. I promised you some, and now I've been talking about no return to the high asset prices, but here comes the good news. There are a number of economies abroad that really sort of barely know we had a problem. They know it, of course, but they have continued to grow through it because they are on entirely different growth trajectories than the United States, Japan, and Europe. They are in the entering phase, the beginning phase of their development and growth. And while having some of the biggest countries in the world go through a recession hasn't been helpful to them, they have been able to perpetuate and keep their growth trends going. And you can see that that creates, when the US, Europe, Japan, the large countries drop fairly significantly and other smaller countries continue to grow at a very rapid rate. And this is not just India and China that you hear so much about. I mean, Brazil is another one right here in our own hemisphere that is really looming large and that we need to pay attention to. Countries all around the world, much smaller ones as well, they've grown. You can see that creates almost like a tectonic shift, almost like an earthquake. It shakes the order of things. Because those that were large are falling, those that were small are rising. And with that creates a whole different set of capital flows, where money comes from and where it goes to. With capital flow is where investment occurs, is where growth occurs, where currencies are weak and strong. So don't think of this recovery as just a return to the old world order in either an economic sense or, I know we've been asked to stay away from politics, so I'll do my best, but there is just a little bit, or quite actually a significant effect on political power around the world because of this tectonic shift that's occurred economically. It is, after all, money that buys friends. Some of you are here with your friend, and I don't mean that, but around the world. Look at where we're devoting our resources now, those few that we have available to spend. And the countries that have capital now to invest, either in their own economies or to put abroad, are the ones that are beginning to just hold greater power in the way negotiations are going, in the way even governments are forming. I'll just give you an example to be a little more specific about that. I mentioned Brazil. They're beginning to have a lot of clout in Latin America. South America and Latin America. A number of situations where the United States has wanted to intervene, and we've made our desires very clear. And of course we have that problem with Venezuela and Cuba and some other countries that we always know take a different stance than we do. But now here we have Brazil saying, no, the American solution is not the solution, and we're going to support some of these countries to go their own way and to go a different way from what the United States wants them to do. And guess what? That's what's been happening. So that's just one really specific example of how what we have come to expect our economic clout to do for us politically is also going to be changing in the new order that emerges. So let's think a little about then where is some of this growth occurring? What are the countries that we really need to pay more attention to and open dialogue with, work with, despite the differences that we have. Again, of course, China and India are key, absolutely key. And so I saved my quotes for the middle of my talk instead of using them in the beginning. But these are two of my favorite of all time, really, and so I have to share them with you. One has to do with India, and this goes way back. It was around 1950. And at that time, of course, India was fairly recently independent, was struggling, was under socialism. The economy really was going nowhere. Just, of course, we all used to say, what a difficult position they were in. And Charles de Gaulle, the leader of France, was asked at that time what he thought about India's prospects. And he said, and this was 1950 now, he said, this just isn't their century. And, this isn't their year, this isn't their decade, this isn't their century. And I would say this is their century. This is their century. They have made such dramatic change. In 1990-91, well, some of you can correct me on that, a major change was made in the government, and they decided to open up. And although change has been somewhat halting and privatization has been slow, it's gone in fits and starts, they've made absolutely dramatic change. Now, an interesting thing about it is they were barely hurt by this financial crisis because their banks are primarily government-owned. And so there's something that we would not have promoted, certainly, but was very helpful to them getting through this crisis. And so you can see that as other countries are thinking about their own model of growth, they have to look at that and see that, gee, the countries that made it through better had a higher level of government involvement. And I'm certainly not advocating that at all. I mean, I'm a Reagan Republican, but I have to tell you that that's the way the world's eyes are beginning to turn because of the success of countries like India. And we have to be willing to deal with that and not just shut it out. Okay, another one is Brazil. I mentioned that. Again, now they're luckily a little happier story for the capitalists of us in the group, that they have also turned to very much more private market. They also had a huge oil discovery, didn't hurt at all. And their growth, they grew about 6% last year, together with India. China, of course, is still growing around 7%. And these are all countries that I've mentioned have very high level of government involvement. So where's the good news for us? One is that, we used to ask for other countries to sort of join with us in being engines of growth around the world. We felt that the burden of global growth was pretty much on the American shoulders, not only to help support countries to get going and develop, but as consumers, not just to buy and help the American economy, but that what we bought, we knew that fueled growth in all these emerging markets. Well, you know what? We asked for it, and now we're getting it. These other countries are growing rapidly. They're beginning to consume. And so that's some good news, because that means there will be higher demand for our products globally. And so there's some help on the employment situation, and particularly export-led growth. Just a final point on that. John was talking about the bond market. Because of their growth, they are accumulating monies and surpluses, whereas the United States, of course, is accumulating debt. Well, once again, we have to look to them to help finance that debt. And so be careful what we ask for. If we ask for all the global trade balances to become more balanced, where are the funds going to come from? We need them to be running some pretty significant surpluses to buy our bonds. I do think, though, that as things level off, some of these global imbalances will correct themselves to some extent. There is pressure on those currencies to rise, the opposite of that being pressure on the dollar to decline. And that's what will, again, stimulate our exports and help the economy and unemployment. So it all fits together. But I'll make a fearless forecast. John made his about housing market being down 30%, so I'll make mine. I think we'll probably see the dollar just as one currency that most of us can relate to, the dollar against the euro at $2 per euro within 2 years. So if you're planning your European vacation, get it in now, or start saving. Because it's going to take about that magnitude of depreciation to help right some of these imbalances. Again, with more rapid growth abroad, that will be helpful to us, but it also means a change, a shift in global economic power, in global political power. So, let's adjust our thinking to how to survive and work well in that new environment, a recovery, but not a return.